Well, welcome back to another episode of the Partly Cloudy podcast. Once again, we're so glad you're here, and we're so glad you've joined us. I have Chief Meteorologist Jenna Petracci on here with me today. She did a Thanksgiving special episode with us, and that was super fun, so I'm excited to have her on here. And now we're going to talk more about winter things and actually get a little bit of her meteorology expertise here, so I'm super happy she's on the show with us today.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to believe we're already talking about winter weather, Avery. I feel like the fall flew by. Really, since you started working here in May, these seasons have just flown by. We're already almost at the end of the year.
I know.
And, you know, down here in the South, we're not super focused on winter weather like places in the North would be, but last year definitely proved that it can happen, and we're gearing you up for your first year as a meteorologist forecasting winter weather. So
yes,
I hope you're ready. It's going to be fun, though. You know, it can be stressful. I know last year for me with the snow, it was a bit of a challenge as a meteorologist down here in the South. It's just not something we're as experienced with, honestly, compared to the meteorologists up north. But it's a fun challenge, and I know most people do want snow. So even though I'm not the biggest fan of snow, I'm rooting for it to happen again this year for the sake of all the kids that just had so much fun last year playing in it.
I know, that was such a cool experience because I was in Mississippi at the time last year, and we barely got any snow. It was mostly ice, and then my family was sending me pictures of, oh, look at the snow.
Yeah, and what's funny is even though you were further north, even a lot of places south of you got snow.
Yes.
Which very rare setup there. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking all about different winter weather scenarios. But we're going to start out with a look outside the door, not here in the CSRA, but Avery, what are we looking at here?
Right now we're looking at Paradise, Michigan. So this is a super cool sky view cam that we have. Paradise, Michigan is actually looking over Lake Superior. So you can kind of see Lake Superior there in the distance. I'm going to pull it up just a little bit closer for you guys to see there. And behind all of that snow is a Great Lake, Lake Superior there. A very beautiful view, a very snowy view. They typically always have snow this time of year because of lake effect snow. And I really like that view of the snow contrasted with that orange roof. I think it's very, very pretty. One of my favorite sky view cams during the fall, during the summer, winter, any season. It's a very beautiful sight.
It is. I have to say, though, I just love the irony of it being called Paradise, Michigan. For me, when you think of paradise, I think warmth, I think Bahamas, I think tropical vacation. I don't think Michigan. No offense. No offense. Michigan's a great state. I've been there before. I love Michigan when it comes to northern states, but pretty funny that it's called paradise. This is some people's paradise, though, not mine. But a lot of people, like I mentioned down here in the South, would love to have just a snowy scene like this. Not my cup of tea. I wish it was a little bit warmer right now, but if it's going to be as cold as it has been lately, we might as well have some snow with it.
That's how I feel. Whenever it's the bitter cold in the southeast, if it's below freezing, it might as well be snowing at that point, because otherwise it's just an ugly cold.
Right, and we get to below freezing temperatures a lot here with those lows, but everything needs to align perfectly in order for us to have that snowy setup, or even just ice or freezing rain. A lot of things have to come together. It's like baking a cake. You know, you could have a few ingredients, but imagine you don't have butter for your cake. And it's not going to turn out too well. So let's go ahead and talk about some of these different scenarios. A lot of y'all have heard of the wedge. We talk about it all the time, and the wedge can happen throughout the year, but a lot of times it happens during this time of the year. It's also known as cold air damming. We just call it the wedge. It's easier. But essentially it's when that cold air coming in from the northeast with high pressure up in the northeast, that's what's driving in that northeast wind. That cold air gets trapped on the east side of the Appalachian Mountain Range, the windward side, and then it just kind of filters into the CSRA. But on the flip side, we also usually will have some sort of frontal boundary to the south of us, like a stalled front or a warm front. And this will bring in a southwest flow of moisture, and that leads to the cloud cover and rain. Now, a lot of times this can lead to a winter weather setup, like an ice storm even. This is definitely a scary situation when it comes to the threat of ice storms. But a lot of times with these cold air damming situations, we actually won't be cold enough to see winter weather. It'll be cold, just like it has been over the past few days with highs only in the 40s. But whenever you have the cloud cover overnight, a lot of times we'll refer to that as a blanket. Just kind of insulates us and keeps that warm air trapped at the surface. So over the past week, for example, we've had a lot of mornings with lows at around 40, and then our highs have only been at 50.
Right.
So I feel like it's confusing to a lot of people because you think, oh, highs are in the 50s. That means lows must be in the 20s because usually you have around that 30, 40-degree spread. But not the case when you're in a cold air damming setup usually because of all that cloud cover and the moisture around, the fog. So yeah, this can lead to an ice storm type situation sometimes, but a lot of time it's just not cold enough. But we do have possible scenarios where we can have that cold air get further down into the south. And Avery, talk about that with us here, the polar vortex.
Yeah, that's right. So the polar vortex happens whenever there's either an upper level low or a surface low, just depending on where that is in the layer of our atmosphere. But regardless of it, those low pressure systems are powerful enough that it actually pushes that jet stream down southward. And so whenever we have that southward dip of the jet stream, it brings those Arctic temperatures with it. So you're thinking temperatures that are likely in the Northeast and northern New York, Maine, Canada. All of those temperatures are being pushed down much further south than what we're used to. And so because of that polar vortex really just being disrupted, bringing the jet stream down and those Arctic temperatures with it, whenever it's coupled with a situation like the cold air damming or some other possible scenarios we'll talk about shortly, that gives us the best setup for that snowfall because we'll have the colder temperatures as well as the forcing mechanisms.
That's exactly right. And a lot of times the polar vortex, the wording can be confusing because you would think a stronger polar vortex would be what brings us that cold air down south. It's actually a weakening polar vortex up north, all up at the Arctic Circle. And when it weakens, that's when the cold air dips down south. And there's a lot we could talk about with the polar vortex. So I think we're going to do a whole separate episode on that in the future. We've still got a lot of ways to go when it comes to winter sticking around for a while. So stay tuned for a more in-depth episode on that. So that polar vortex can bring that cold air mass down to the south to bring those below freezing temperatures. But like Avery mentioned, we also need some sort of lifting mechanism to bring us all that moisture we need that could lead to winter weather. So here's scenario number 1. This would be if low pressure develops over the Gulf and moves northeast along the coastline. This could also turn into a nor'easter event that we often hear about. So notice how that low tracks to the south of us, and it also really depends on the location of the low. Because of this one, in this example, taking that southern track, pretty much going over the water, this would be a really good scenario of something that could bring us that winter weather. And you can also see in scenario number 2, low pressure could also form along a front that already exists. So say we have a cold front that comes through, it stalls out, becomes a stationary boundary to the south of us. A lot of times those spin up an area of low pressure. Also can lead to a great winter weather scenario. But just remember, the key here is these setups happen all the time. We usually just don't have that Arctic air in place when it happens because remember, low pressure, that's bringing cloud cover, it's bringing rain. That usually doesn't lead to strong radiational cooling overnight to bring those cold temperatures. All right, scenario number 3, an upper level low pressure develops over us and drags colder air aloft. So we also have different types of low pressure. So we have the surface low pressure that we were just talking about. We also have what's known as that upper level low, which is way up in the atmosphere. And if that develops, that could also lead to a winter weather scenario. I believe that has happened here a couple times before where we've had that upper level low just lingering in the south. And it hasn't brought us significant winter weather, but it has brought us a few flurries here and there before, especially in our northern counties. Now, another scenario, which is a bit more uncommon, would be a cold front coming through. And Avery, you can touch on this one a little bit more.
Yeah, that's right. So whenever we have a cold front coming through, the amount of cooling that happens is really not as significant as it would be where it first starts out, right? So as that cold front, we get many questions of why do a lot of storms in the summertime associated with cold fronts fizzle out by the time it gets here. It's the Earth is already expending that energy. The Earth is always trying to be in an equilibrium state, meaning it's always trying to be equal. And so with those cold fronts, what's happening is the Earth is just trying to get us to one temperature collectively. And so whenever this situation happens, by the time time it gets all the way to Georgia and South Carolina, it's really ran out of a lot of steam. But sometimes those cold fronts can be strong enough and steep enough. I like to call them stout. If I tell you a stout cold front's coming through, that means that it's going to really drop off our temperatures, possibly even 20, 25 degrees, which could give us, if we have temperatures that are in the 40s, we drop 20, 25 degrees, that's definitely going to give us below freezing temperatures and allow us to see a little bit of snow with that cold front as it moves through. So it's more unlikely that that's going to happen here, but it's still a possibility. It's not out of the realm of what we see here in the CSRA.
Yeah, so our ideal setup that we're usually looking for would be an area of low pressure developing, whether it's at the surface or the upper levels. But yeah, sometimes this cold front can lead to that. But you can see we have those stormy icons there. That shows that a lot of times, like it says in the last sentence here, colder air chasing moisture rarely works in our favor. And that's because a lot of times those air masses will clash and just lead to a winter weather storm outbreak, essentially, instead of, well, I should say a winter storm outbreak instead of a winter weather setup. So
Right.
A lot of times this is the scenario we would look for in a severe weather environment more so than winter weather, but still a possibility here in the South. Now, even if we have one of these scenarios, though, in place, it doesn't mean that we're just going to be blanketed with a beautiful cover of white snow.
Right.
It's usually pretty split depending on where you are in the CSRA, and unfortunately that's the case a lot with our forecast. It's a tricky area to forecast because places like Wilkes County are completely different than Allendale County. The forecast is just so entirely different, and that's usually the case with these winter weather scenarios as well. So this is probably no surprise to anyone. If we do have that winter weather set up, the most likely area to actually see snow would be our northern counties, especially the northwestern counties. Then, unfortunately, right around where Augusta and Aiken would be, that's where it would be more likely that we see some sort of freezing rain or sleet. And then a lot of times these low pressures that move in will just lead to a cold, heavy rain and windy setup for our southeastern counties especially. But it all depends on where that low tracks. Like we mentioned earlier, if the low pressure is a little bit further towards the north, that's not looking good for the entire CSRA. But if that low pressure is moving along the Gulf, over the water, down towards the Florida Panhandle, then that usually brings that snow line further towards the southern half of our viewing area as well. So, I wish it was as simple as we had cold air and a system moving in means snow for everyone, but usually very rare that we just see snow. And even though you haven't been a meteorologist yet during a winter season, from living in Aiken, I'm sure you know that a lot of times, unfortunately, it's more so an ice event rather than snow.
Yeah, so I've shared on the podcast, especially my experience in the 2014 ice storm, and then we've had a few flurries here and there. I remember in middle school, we had a snow flurry outside, and we still were in school because it happened during the day. And as soon as it touched the ground, it melted, and our teachers took us outside so we could see it and be like, "Oh my gosh, there's snow!" But that was about the extent of the snow that we get here. So for us to see snow that accumulates on the ground in the way that it did last year was, quite a special treat for this area. And that's what we're going to talk about next when we come back from break. So we'll see you in just a few minutes. Bye.
All right. Hey, everyone. So I'm so excited to show you these photos. I show these photos nearly at every school visit I do. Even though it was nearly a year ago now, the kids still get just as excited. So this was January 22nd of 2025. These are actual photos that were sent in by our WJBF viewers, and it was a winter wonderland here in the CSRA all across the region. So you can see it really depends on where you were exactly in the CSRA, though, how much snow you saw. But some people were at least able to see a dusting. Others saw enough snow to make snow angels and snowmen and have snowball fights. But it was a beautiful snow event. And it was just so fun to see everyone get so excited and to have the challenge of forecasting an event like this. So here's the snowfall reports, Avery. You can see, as you know, this is really significant for our area.
Wow.
Wrightsville, all the way down in our southern viewing area, 5 inches of snow. So, yeah, It was quite an event.
And that sounds so awesome. And
Yeah.
that was our first winter weather scenario setup. And so that was, if you remember, that low pressure that formed really right over New Orleans. It brought New Orleans 8 inches of snow, tracked across the Gulf, and then went towards the eastern seaboard and curved up there. So that makes sense in that winter weather scenario why Wrightsville got the most amount of snow, and those southern line counties got the most amount of snow because they were closest to that low pressure system.
Exactly. So it was a big treat for those southern line counties. You can see here in Augusta, we didn't pick up a whole lot, but to me, seeing 1.7 inches, that was a real treat in itself.
Yeah.
Aiken, even more than that at 2.5. But still, these snowfall amounts don't even compare to the top 10 snow events that we've seen specifically in Augusta over the past several years, going back to 1973 in first place. I'm sure a ton of you guys remember this event. We talk about it all the time. 14 inches of snow.
Wow.
That is the record by far. The year 1914, not too far behind, but it would take a really significant winter weather event in order for us to see over a foot of snow again in Augusta. Also, snowiest winters on record, of course, that year of 1972 into 73 comes into first place, over 14 inches. Yeah, looking at these records, a lot of them were in the 1900s. We had 2009, 2010, 8 inches of snow. I hear a lot of people at the station talk about that one quite a bit. And then we had another event in the early 2000s with 4 inches. But this just goes to show that it's very rare for us to have such a snowy winter.
Mm-hmm. That's definitely true. I'm trying to even remember the 2009, 2010, because I would have been a kid. I would have been playing out in the snow there.
Yeah.
I definitely don't remember it being quite exactly 8 inches, but I grew up in Aiken, so
Right.
it probably was a little bit less.
Yeah, you'll have to talk to your parents about that, see if they have any photos of you from that year.
Yeah.
Because I don't know. I'll have to do some more research on that event specifically as well, because these are the totals for Augusta specifically. Of course, it's kind of hard to go back in the almanac data to see the exact amounts per location, but it does, like we've talked about with these scenarios, it does drastically vary from location to location. So
Yeah.
really crazy though that we've seen that much snow over the past several years. So now on to the big question: is snow in the forecast right now? No.
Nope.
Not at all. I actually got asked this last night by one of our producers. Apparently, it's already circulating on social media.
Yeah.
The weather app
the
said
Arctic
snow.
blast.
Yep. I also got a question asking, are we going to be in the single digits?
Right.
No. It's very upsetting that all that misleading information spreads online. It is going to be cold. Next week,
Right.
we've got another cool down coming. We're going to be back to below freezing overnight, highs in the 50s, but it's because of high pressure moving in. So high pressure, it's going to clear us out. It's going to dry us out. It's not going to be any moisture around when we have that cool down. So no snow in the forecast. No in blue, no in teal.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter where you are. I'm telling you the same thing.
Exactly.
And I also had a viewer ask me on Facebook the other day, why is it that we see freezing rain so much more often than snow? I know this is so frustrating. Freezing rain is definitely dangerous. We never want to have freezing rain. And a lot of times it's because of what's called overrunning. So when you're talking about these different air masses, warmer air rises over the cold air. So colder air is more dense, it goes down to the surface, and then that warmer air overruns the cold air. And down here in the south, where we're close to the Gulf with all that rich Gulf moisture around, a lot of times we just don't have that entire column of air in the atmosphere below freezing like they do up in the north. This is pretty much what we've been talking about already. We have this warm layer trapped in the mid-levels of the atmosphere. And what happens there is everything up in the clouds starts off as snow, and then it falls through the warm layer, melts as rain, and then it could hit the surface, which can be below freezing, especially in valleys like we have here around the CSRA where that cold air gets trapped. Once again, that cold air is dense, so it's at the bottom. And then it freezes at the surface. Not a good scenario. But yeah, that happens a lot here. So we're going to do another in-depth episode on this, breaking down freezing rain. There's also sleet, and those get confused a lot of times, and I understand why. And then, of course, explaining just the difference between snow and rain and all of that as well. So stay tuned for another episode on that. And, of course, if you have any questions specifically on this topic, you can always let us know.
Yep. And so we're going to be back, and we'll come back with the On Our Radar segment. So I'm excited about that. My favorite part of the segment portion part of the podcast here. So
Yep.
Welcome back to the What's on Our Radar segment here, but instead of Miller, I of course have Jenna if you've been watching along the whole episode. And so today, for the On Our Radar segment, we've got a few things to talk about.
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about the temperature outlook. We usually put this in the What's on Our Radar segment because, with this podcast being filmed a few days before it airs, unfortunately we can't give you that much detailed forecast information. The forecast is changing all the time. But what we can show you is our temperature outlook from the Climate Prediction Center. And this is showing that from December 17th through December 23rd, temperatures are going to be slightly above average. Keyword, slightly. I know you're seeing the orange and you think warm, but look at the scale up there. Equal chance of being near or below average is represented by the gray color. And then right above that yellowy tangerine color, that means slightly above. So I don't want you to think overwhelmingly warm, but I do want you to think more so maybe some upper 50s to low to maybe mid 60s leading up to December 23rd. Because by that point, our average high temperatures are in the upper 50s.
Right.
So, or upper 50s to low 60s. So even getting a 64-degree day at that point, that's now above average. So our chance of seeing 70-degree days, it's going down. We usually get at least one in December and then again in January. Those 70-degree days can still happen, but pretty much what this is saying is I'm going to go ahead and say upper 50s to maybe mid 60s is what we're expecting.
Yeah. And I can appreciate that because really the whole month of November and now the first couple of weeks of December, we have been below average, like well below average. Yep. So I'm excited to see some.
60s sounds nice and comfortable. Okay, but with that being said, I also want to talk about severe weather season. And I know it says fall severe weather season, and you're probably thinking we're about to be in winter, but really this can happen into winter as well. It already feels like it's winter, honestly, with how cold it's been lately. But technically it is still fall. And fall in the months of November and December is typically when we have that secondary peak of severe weather, our main peak being in the spring. But it also can happen this time of the year. And the reason being is because of that transition from warm, moist air to cold, dry air. And that actually goes hand in hand with the setup we were showing earlier, scenario number 4. When we have that cold front come through, that's bringing in the cold and dry air behind it, but it's interacting with a lot of warm and moist air, and that could lead to severe weather outbreaks. So a lot of times in the fall and winter, you're thinking of winter weather, but down here in the South, we unfortunately have to think of severe weather as well. And lately, a struggle Avery and I and the entire weather team has had has been forecasting long range. The last 3 days or so of our 10-day forecast has been a big challenge. And that's because we look at these two different models, the main ones being the GFS and the European model, and both of them are all over the road. The Euro has been trending cooler, showing highs only in the 40s. The GFS has been showing highs in the 70s. Usually the main takeaway when you see that is the answer is somewhere in the middle, somewhere meaning we're going to be in the 50s and 60s, kind of like what I was saying earlier. But what this also can tell us is that there's going to be some warm air very close to where there's going to be some colder air, and that can also often clash and lead to these severe weather outbreaks. So this is just something that we're going to be watching very closely. The weather has been super quiet lately, but with these models kind of indicating temperatures all over the place, that could be indicating the potential of if we have a strong cold front come through or a low pressure system, that could bring us some severe weather. So nothing I'm expecting over the next 7 days or so, but just something to keep in mind for this time of the year. Oftentimes November is our driest month on record, or second driest month, and you're getting comfortable, you're used to the sunshine, it's been beautiful, and then all of a sudden, the bottom can fall out and we can go to storms. We had that big hailstorm in Edgefield County last year. I don't remember specifically when, I don't want to say because I don't want to be wrong, but I believe that was in the winter of last year. So just all of a sudden you could have a big hail event or, just these isolated events even. So something to just keep in mind as we move forward.
Yeah. And talking about moving forward, we are going to talk a little bit about Christmas whenever we come back from break and all the details for our next episode, so stay tuned. Well, welcome back, and you are looking at our Christmas card. It is official, WJBF. We have a weather team Christmas card. I'll read it to you. It says, "Merry Christmas, hoping you have snow, much fun this holiday season, and a bright New Year."
We love it. We love a good weather pun, and this was so fun to make. This was Avery's idea, and it was just awesome. I mean, we took these photos the other day. I love our team so much, and this just, I feel like, really shows how great our team is and just how much we love each other, truly. Like, the fact that we're all going to get together and make a Christmas card, I don't think people who didn't like each other would do that. So be sure to follow everyone on social media. This is where you can keep up with us for daily forecast information. We're all really good about updating our pages, including, of course, the WJBF page and the WJBF weather page as well. But follow our individual pages. That's where it's really easy to interact with us one-on-one, suggest ideas for future podcasts. So yeah, please stay in touch. Always send us cool weather photos as well. And we're always excited and more than willing to answer your questions and help you stay up to date with the forecast.
That's right. Well, without further ado, that comes to the end of our episode. We're so thankful that you've came and watched us and joined us for, once again, another episode of the Partly Cloudy podcast. And stay tuned to next week, December 19th. We're going to air the Christmas special. It's going to be something you don't want to miss. See you next time.
Bye.